The story begins with a man whose reputation preceded him in every corner of the business world, the millionaire CEO. He was a figure both feared and admired, known not only for his immense wealth but also for his unyielding standards. Stories of his ruthlessness circulated among employees and competitors alike. People whispered that he had no patience for mistakes, no tolerance for excuses, and no room for mediocrity. In his office, deadlines were sacred, and failure was unforgivable. Every decision he made was calculated, precise, and often harsh. He demanded perfection, expecting his employees to anticipate problems before they arose, solve them without guidance, and exceed expectations continuously. New hires quickly learned that the CEO did not reward talent alone, he demanded results that often seemed impossible. Even the most skilled and experienced professionals found themselves under relentless pressure, working long hours with little recognition. Rumor had it that no one ever lasted more than a month under his leadership. Employees who tried to challenge him were quickly dismissed, and those who submitted but underperformed were quietly pushed out. This atmosphere created a climate of fear and tension throughout the company. Teams became robotic, creativity was stifled, and people worked more out of anxiety than passion. Yet, despite his harshness, the CEO was brilliant. His strategies turned failing companies into profitable empires, and investors flocked to him, drawn by his uncompromising focus and unwavering discipline. He believed that emotions had no place in business, compassion was a weakness, and loyalty was tested only through results. Colleagues often described him as a man of iron will, someone who could shut down entire departments with a single glance. His office, perched high above the city, symbolized his untouchable position. Yet behind the cold exterior was a mind that had sacrificed personal relationships, friendships, and even simple joys for the sake of success. He had become a man whose life was measured in profits, contracts, and victories, but never in human connection. This is the world into which she would enter. A place where fear and respect coexisted, where survival required more than skill or knowledge, it required resilience, intuition, and courage. And as the story would soon reveal, this very environment, built on rigid rules and relentless pressure, was precisely what made her impact so extraordinary. Amid the aura of fear and perfectionism surrounding the CEO's empire, a young woman applied for a position that many considered impossible to survive. She had no prestigious degree, no prior experience at high-powered companies, and no influential connections to her name. Her resume was simple, her background ordinary, and yet something about her application caught the attention of the CEO's assistant, or perhaps it was sheer curiosity. Everyone else assumed she wouldn't last a week. Most had already given up on her before she even walked through the office doors. Her first day was a stark contrast to the polished, intimidating environment. The other employees, seasoned professionals who had long adapted to the CEO's relentless expectations, eyed her with skepticism. They whispered behind closed doors, calling her naive, unprepared, and foolish to think she could handle a month, let alone thrive. But she entered the office with a quiet confidence, an inner calm that seemed at odds with the tension that hung thick in the air. She didn't come with arrogance or a desire to impress, she came with curiosity, determination, and a willingness to learn. Where others had tried to conform, she observed, listened, and assessed. She studied the patterns of the CEO's expectations, noting the small details that others overlooked. She realized that surviving here wouldn't be about blending in or mimicking others, it would be about finding a way to work with the man himself, rather than simply obeying him. What set her apart was her resilience. Challenges that made other employees quit or crumble seemed to invigorate her. When faced with impossible tasks, she didn't panic or complain, she sought solutions, thinking creatively and strategically. She asked questions that others were too afraid to voice, not to defy authority, but to improve understanding and efficiency. Slowly, her presence began to stir curiosity in the CEO, who was unused to employees who didn't simply submit to his rules or vanish under pressure. It was clear that she was different. She wasn't just another employee who would disappear after a few days of stress. She carried a spark, a unique combination of intelligence, courage, and persistence. Her background may have been humble, her experience limited, but her determination and insight hinted that she was capable of changing not just her own fate, but perhaps even the rigid world she had just stepped into. Her arrival was quiet, almost unassuming, but the CEO, whose world had been orderly and predictable for years, would soon find that this unassuming young woman had the potential to challenge everything he thought he knew about loyalty, strength, and success. By the time she had settled into the office routine, it was clear that she was not like the others. Unlike her colleagues, who bent under the weight of the CEO's expectations, she maintained a calm composure and an unwavering focus. She didn't attempt to flatter him with empty praise or cower in fear of his notorious temper. Instead, she observed, questioned, and quietly challenged the way things were done. At first, the CEO was intrigued, then irritated. No one had ever dared to approach him with questions that hinted at flaws in his methods. Her approach was subtle but deliberate. When a task seemed impossible, she didn't complain, she suggested alternatives. When she noticed inefficiencies, she offered solutions instead of following orders blindly. These actions were unlike anything the CEO had encountered before. Employees either obeyed, quit, or made costly mistakes. She, however, was different. She combined intelligence with tact, courage with humility. Slowly, the CEO began to notice not only her competence but also the unusual confidence behind it. The real turning point came during a high-pressure project. The CEO, frustrated with a bottleneck that threatened a major deal, expected compliance, obedience, and speed. She, however, didn't just execute orders, she spoke up, offering a new approach that challenged the traditional methods he had relied upon for years. There was a risk. One misstep could have ended her career instantly, yet she presented her ideas logically, respectfully, and convincingly. Her insight worked. The project moved forward, smoother and faster than anyone had anticipated. For the first time, the CEO experienced a mixture of admiration and surprise. Here was someone who could handle pressure better than most, yet was not consumed by fear. She had the courage to speak the truth, to suggest better paths, and the intelligence to do so without arrogance. Slowly, a change began in the CEO. He began to see beyond the rigid rules he had enforced for so long. This young woman, who no one expected to survive a week, was demonstrating that strength wasn't just about domination or control, it could also come from collaboration, courage, and honesty. Outside the office, employees began to notice a subtle shift as well. The atmosphere, once tense and fearful, began to show small cracks of hope. She wasn't just surviving, she was influencing, reshaping, and gently breaking down the barriers that had kept the CEO and his team distant, rigid, and disconnected. This phase marked the beginning of her profound impact. The ice around the CEO, the fortress of control and fear he had built, was starting to melt, and it was all because of one woman who dared to be different, who dared to challenge without defiance, and who dared to humanize a world built on perfection alone. The true test of her abilities came when the company faced a crisis that could have destroyed everything the CEO had built. A major client threatened to withdraw a contract, and the project that was critical to the company's reputation and revenue had hit a series of unforeseen obstacles. Panic spread among the staff. Many of the CEO's seasoned employees, who had been under constant pressure and fear, were ready to quit, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge. Yet she did not falter. While others saw chaos, she saw opportunity. She approached the CEO calmly, analyzing the situation with clarity and proposing actionable solutions that no one else had considered. Instead of following orders blindly or deferring entirely to authority, she worked alongside the CEO, showing initiative while respecting his leadership. Her approach was neither aggressive nor submissive, it was balanced, strategic, and fearless. During long hours of problem-solving, she demonstrated an extraordinary combination of intelligence, adaptability, and emotional resilience. When mistakes happened, as they inevitably did in a crisis, she remained composed, learning from them immediately and adjusting her approach. She encouraged collaboration among the remaining employees, inspiring a sense of unity and purpose that had long been missing. Her presence shifted the energy of the entire office. Fear was replaced by focus, despair by determination. The CEO watched in astonishment as she navigated the crisis with precision. For the first time, he realized that her value went far beyond completing tasks. She had an innate ability to lead, to motivate, and to inspire loyalty. She had not only survived the pressure that had driven countless others away but had become the stabilizing force that kept the company from collapsing. Her ideas and courage directly salvaged the project, saving the client relationship and protecting the company's reputation. This moment marked a profound shift in the CEO's perception. The unyielding man who had believed loyalty was proven only through blind obedience began to understand that true strength lay in trust, courage, and the ability to think independently. She had demonstrated that success was not just about rigid control or perfection, it was about resilience, insight, and the willingness to take responsibility when others faltered. By the end of the crisis, the CEO had not only regained stability in his company but had also gained a new perspective on leadership, teamwork, and human potential. She had shown him that an employee could challenge, support, and even transform a leader without rebellion, and in doing so, she cemented her place as indispensable. The impossible standards he had set were no longer a barrier but a canvas on which she had proven her extraordinary capability. By the end of the month, the office had undergone a transformation almost as remarkable as the young woman herself. The CEO, once seen as an unapproachable figure of fear and perfection, was no longer the same man. The walls he had built around himself, walls of control, rigidity, and detachment, began to crumble, brick by brick, under the influence of someone who dared to be different. Where he had expected subservience and compliance, he now experienced loyalty, initiative, and courage that stemmed not from fear, but from respect and mutual understanding. Her impact was subtle at first, a quiet shift in tone and behavior. She didn't boast, seek credit, or demand recognition, she simply performed her role with excellence while staying true to her values. But the changes she sparked were profound. The CEO began to listen more, to consider perspectives he had long ignored, and to value collaboration over unilateral decisions. He saw the power of empathy in leadership, the way it could motivate, inspire, and even drive results better than fear ever could. Outside the professional realm, her influence began to touch him personally as well. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, and to accept guidance from someone younger, less experienced, yet wiser in some ways than he had been in decades. She challenged his assumptions not with confrontation, but with clarity and courage. She reminded him that true strength is not about dominance, it is about balance, trust, and understanding. The employees, who had long tiptoed around the CEO in anxiety, now felt a renewed sense of purpose. The office atmosphere, once tense and oppressive, became more dynamic and creative. People were encouraged to contribute ideas, to take ownership, and to work together rather than simply survive. Her presence had created a ripple effect, changing not only the CEO but the culture of the entire company. In the CEO's eyes, she had done what no one else could. She hadn't just survived where countless others had failed, she had reshaped his worldview, proving that leadership is as much about heart as it is about strategy. By the end of that transformative month, he no longer measured success purely in profits, contracts, or achievements, he saw the value of people, loyalty, and genuine connection. In the quiet moments of reflection, the CEO realized that this young woman had turned his world upside down, not through rebellion, but through brilliance, courage, and humanity. What began as an unlikely hiring decision had evolved into a partnership, a mentorship, and a profound lesson in the power of resilience and authenticity. Her journey was a testament to the fact that one person, no matter how underestimated, could inspire change, break barriers, and redefine the meaning of success for an entire empire.